This week, Justin Foster joins us to help us foster our thinking, which is oddly ironic. In our stories of the week, get to $1,000 first. Know these numbers before you go into your VC meeting. How to start a company with no free time. I probably should have read that article more than once. Stories about stay-ups. And, of course, we can't kick off the first show or a couple of shows of 2017 without talking about some type of predictions. In this case, what one top VC firm predicts will happen in 2017. We'll cover some listener feedback and more on this edition of Startup Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by Tenable Network Security, creators of Nessus, the world's best vulnerability scanner. Jumpstart your security program today and evaluate Security Center CV, the continuous security monitoring solution. For more information, visit them on the web at tenable.com. IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Access over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand via Chromecast, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, PC, or your mobile device. IT Pro TV's premium membership grants access to all courses, transcripts, virtual machine labs, and transcender practice exams. Corporate and group pricing are available. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the life of your account, visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS30. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested them? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Welcome, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. I am the founder and CEO of Security Weekly here, as well as the CEO of Offensive Countermeasures. And we're broadcasting live today from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. And I definitely would have read the article on how to start a company with no free time, except I don't have any free time. So
to read the article.
The article. So I see Mr. Michael Santarcangelo is here on the lines. He's got plenty of free time. He lives on the beach. He just, he walks.
It's going to be a cold beach this weekend.
Do you still do long walks on the cold beach or not so much?
You can skate, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome. What's going on, dude?
Still barefoot. I'm excited. It's 2016 was certainly an interesting year, but it was a great year, and 2017 is looking even better. And I think there's so much we can do with the show, and I'm amped about it.
I'm excited. We're doing a podcast now. It's so exciting. I feel like when you first start, you're like, all right, when is this gonna? Now I feel like we're actually we're in the groove, man, and we're podcasting. It's gonna be fun.
We're going to get better. We've got good plans. I think today kicks it off. We're going to bring in some different ways of thinking about things. We're going to bring in some different expertise in, you and I, we had a production meeting Tuesday, and we'll keep playing with this because when we started this whole show, the idea was let's go talk about or let's go explore the business of security as we improve the security of business. And that lets us work with whether you're on the investment side or you're looking to do a startup, you're in a startup, or maybe you're an enterprise person and you're a buyer of startups or you're a consumer of startups or you're just interested in innovation, right? So we cover a big range. What I've realized as we get deeper into the startup community and the startup space, what we really have this opportunity to do is to legitimize the security discussion in the startup community. And that's remarkable. I think we keep talking about how do we change things. We're how we start to change things. And that sets us up for a great year. So I'm pretty amped.
I am too. Michael, why don't you introduce our first and only guest for this episode, but our first guest of 2017.
I'm excited about this. So this is Justin Foster is joining us. Justin Foster is a co-founder of a company called Root and River. And I'll let him tell us about that as we go through this, because so what's cool about this is he's another person. He's worked with security companies. He's been part of a tech startup that was successfully sold, and his expertise, he is often sought out for his expertise around branding. And I told him when I was talking to him last night, I always feel like that doesn't do Justin service. Justin is the person who stepped in with me a couple years ago when I was mealy-mouthed trying to explain what I did, and helped me see it better. Might have taken a 2x4 to the head, but he wielded it gracefully. And since then, he's become a close advisor and a good friend. He's got this fantastic opportunity to look at how you build a brand, and that's what Root and River is built around. In fact, if he will, maybe, Justin, welcome to the program. I love the story of Root and River, and I think that holds a lot. So for an audience that's got startups or looking at brands or teams or everything else, Justin's message is this is going to be fun. Paul, I think you're going to have a lot of good questions in this. Justin, welcome. You're the first of our year, and you're part of our year of expansion and legitimizing conversation. So welcome to Startup Security Weekly.
Awesome. Thank you both. This type of stuff is, I love to do this. I love to sit down and talk to people that don't typically think about branding, to talk about branding. This is why I never get invited to talk to marketing groups, mostly because they're full of narcissists and they hate me because I make fun of them. So I love talking to security guys, tech, HR, and because those are where the brands really come from, especially the CEO of a tech startup has a lot more influence on brand than he or she may realize.
Wow.
Like Paul.
And I've got a lot of questions about branding, actually,
so
from a lot of different angles.
You have no time,
yes.
And you have a hell of a lot more influence than you realize. That's fantastic. Where do you
So,
go?
Justin, here's where I want to start, because I think a lot of us that are thinking about a startup or maybe have a startup either have this problem and maybe don't realize it, right? Or they don't even realize that it is a problem when they're starting out. And that is, so you come up with a company name, right, as part of your brand. Then you come up with products that have different names. How do you balance your brands between your company and your product? And the follow-on question is, like, what happens when the product brand becomes stronger than the company brand, but usually it's vice versa, but what happens when the opposite happens?
Sure, and there's actually a third brand in startups that we should include in that too. So I think the starting point is to unify around a definition of brand. And a brand is your presence when you're not present. And it's comprised of the founder or the co-founding team's beliefs and values, and then how the initial round of hires and then the building out of the culture of a company, how they express those values in the company culture, and then ultimately they're expressed through innovation. And innovation could be products, customer experience, digital experience, all the pieces that are sort of what we consider to be market-facing. In other words, your brand is the juicy middle of your business. It's not the candy wrapper only. And the reason this is important to know, goes to your question, Paul, is that a brand is not the last thing you do anymore. It's the first thing you do, because it's the seedbed of the venture. It's because within it contains these three kind of secret ingredients of brand. Number one is mission. What is the mission? Why do you exist in the world? And we say this constantly at Root and River. You're not really trying to find clients, investors, employees. You're trying to find believers, or at least convert believers. So you have to invite them to something. And
I tend to shun the non-believers.
We do. Yeah, I have an app idea for shunning, but that's a different podcast. So the second thing is your message, and your message isn't your slogan, your jingle, what you have on, that's all. I mean, maybe you need that stuff. I don't know, but your message is what your brand has to say to the world as a truth, as an invitation to believe something differently. And then finally, it's around your model, the way that you do things as a leader. So circling back to your question, there are three actual separate brands that are inside of an organization. The first is the CEO's brand as a leader. He or she has the same traits as a corporate brand. There's a belief system, There's how there's how those belief systems are experienced by others through the behavior, and then there's perception. That's the first one, and that's the brand that gets the funding. That's the brand that attracts the talent. It's not the idea. It's not the company name. It's not the logo. It's the human or humans that are part of the founding team. Then you have the entity brand, like you referred to, and the entity brand is much more what we consider to be traditional branding. And then you have product brands. If you make brand the juicy middle of your business, your product brands can come and go. You can look at Google, for example, and all this. They got more product failures, as a sheer number than they do product wins. Adobe is also that way. And then you go outside of the tech space. Virgin and Richard Branson is a great example. So he's got his personal brand as a leader, Richard Branson, Virgin, the company, and the variety of products that have their name on it. What that means is that Richard Branson could come out with Virgin toothpaste, and people would go buy it, because they already know who he is and they already know who his corporate brand is.
Be some interesting marketing around Virgin toothpaste.
Yes.
I really hope no one else has used my toothpaste before I use it. That's all I gotta say.
I think Virgin toothbrush might be better.
There you go. There you go. I have a couple of questions along those lines. The Google example is interesting because Google is the company name, but it's also the search product, right?
Well, it's Alphabet now.
And it's so much of a strong brand that it is the company name, and it is like a verb in the English language now.
Yeah.
Which I think does that further, obviously, in my opinion, that further strengthens your brand, right? When it is your company name and your flagship product, and it's circulated into the popular vernacular.
Yeah, right. It is, as long as you keep being innovative. So Xerox, to Xerox something became slang, or Kleenex, and it became genericized, but they didn't keep innovating. Mm-hmm. So all that brand equity was being used by someone else. So
you can lose your trademark if it becomes popular like that too.
Right. But the surest way to lose that is to just stop doing interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And so certainly, as long as you can keep being innovative, as long as you can keep some brand equity flowing out into the marketplace, being memorable, then having your company name and your product name, and even the name of your founder. This is why I'm a big fan of companies that are named after the founder, as opposed to a corporate entity, because it creates much better alignment through the process.
But then it's interesting how personal brands tie in. When you're the founder, it's a very strong coupling between that startup and your own personal brand.
That's right.
I think when we start looking outside of that, there could be other people that work for the company that have very strong personal brands that become associated with the company and or product brands. How do you manage that? Is there ever a time where you reach a point where you're concerned that other people's personal brands might become stronger than the company's brand?
Yeah. So what we teach and what happens are two different things. And really it's a battle of ego. What we teach is it's a great thing, an exciting thing when the personal brands inside of a company become even if it could be even larger, or at least more predominant than other brands. What happens, though, even when we teach and preach that for years, is the ego will kick in, and there's this 20th century mindset that if you work in the brand, you are the brand. But there are many companies now that are counterbalancing that. Adobe, for example, has their employee startup initiatives that they do. Any tech brand with a venture division understands the power of personal brands and that they actually complement each other. As long as, and this is sort of the root of the root here, as long as there's a similar DNA of belief systems between the various personal brands that make up a corporate brand.
Mm. Yeah, and I feel like that when that gets decoupled, that can, I don't know, I think it could go either way. I mean, sometimes I think that the company brand and message becomes so different from the person's personal brand, and then you see that person leave, and you're like, well, that's just a natural progression. And now, if the company and the individual have established their brands, that's a parting that can be okay. However, a lot of times it's the opposite way, as you probably very well know, Justin, that the personal brand and the company are very tightly coupled. When that person leaves, you're like, ooh, I don't know. I don't have as much confidence in the brand now because they were so tightly coupled.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of that goes to storytelling. What happened? What's the truth? Founders leave, co-founders leave. This happens in sports all the time. Right now, I think there are 5 job openings in the NFL, and a bunch of assistant coaches are being interviewed as potential. So the offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniel, for example, with the Patriots, being interviewed, I think, for all 5 jobs. Well, Bill Belichick has always encouraged that, and that's what creates a culture that attracts talent, is that you can go use your talent someplace else, and it hurts his brand none. Belichick has a huge ego, but just not about that. And that's because he understands the power of talent. Now, he doesn't necessarily know. I'd like to find out, but I don't think he knows he's branding, but that's what branding is.
Right.
It's encouraging growth within your leadership team. And if they go start their own companies or they go coach for someone else, they're still part of that genetic family tree, as it were, which is good for the overall.
For all the brands, yeah,
right.
Yeah. I mean, because he is the greatest coach of all time. As I wear my Patriots shirt, obviously biased.
That was me relating. As a Raider fan. So.
Well, hold on. You said something there, Justin. I want to go pushing on because I think it's interesting, and you've touched on it, but. So what we see a lot of times with startups is they say, okay, we're going to go define our brand. And what we've heard from you so far is it's not so simple as you sit down and say, this is our brand. Your brand is what you are. It's what you live. And so you can create a brand even if you're not aware of it, like a football coach or somebody else, by their actions, by their ethos, by all sorts of other stuff. And that transcends into a startup. So how does a startup then, if they're thinking about branding as something that's more of a checkbox on a list of things that they need to do to start up, how do they make that shift to realizing branding is more, would you call it an experience? Or I know you gave us the 3 factors. How do they make that shift from it's a thing you do to it's something that you are?
So that's a great question, Mike. Think about it this way. There's 3 3 starting points, and they all go together. The first is, as the founder or the founding team, you actually need to sit down and have a discussion, and this is what we do, but this can be done internally, about what do you actually believe in? What are your values? What are your standards? And a lot of companies do mission.
So is that related to your product? I mean, look, I get it. We're not going to talk about whether you believe in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and stuff like that. But when you're talking about your beliefs, is it relative to business, or are we still looking at some of your core guiding beliefs as a person?
As a human being.
Okay.
Yeah. So as an aside, as a minor tangent, there are 2 human biases that are at play here. One is compartmentalization. This idea that what I believe personally does not somehow get manifested in my business venture, and that's bullcrap. Compartmentalization is a myth. It's a temporary coping mechanism for survival. The second is comparison, and comparison is another bias that we all have. Is we're constantly comparing ourselves to each other. And what we encourage people is to go inward, is what do I believe? That's why we talk about mission so much, because if your brand is your calling, so just to get to the sequence here, like the engineering of a brand, you just take the 5 or 6 things that you absolutely believe in. Then you attach your daily habits as a leader to them. So if you say you believe in transparency, how do you practice that as a daily habit? And then the third one is the perception, is how do you want other people to experience that particular behavior? And that's where product comes in. So product quality, product engineering, product innovation all comes from a belief system that was first a daily habit, and then it became part of the innovation culture. And that's the key to this is you never really ask, well, what does the marketplace need, or what hole can I fill in some sort of product gap? you start with your beliefs, your behaviors, and your perceptions, and then you go find the audience that most needs that, which is completely backwards from how most people who got educated in marketing branding in the in the 90s and the early 2000s, completely backwards from how it's taught. But that's really what happens, especially in a tech brand.
Well, it seems to me too that if you do that, if you know who you are and you've figured that out and you can be true to that, then you go attract people that want that. That almost feels like, even though it may be counterintuitive, that feels like a much smarter way to do stuff, because then you're not worrying about the misfit. You know who you are, and people will see that, they want that, they gravitate towards you. Like, it seems like a much cleaner way to do stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's cleaner. It's more pure, more organic, might be the ways to say it. And it puts the brand, the juicy middle of your business, not just the candy wrapper. That's the starting point. Then your business model can go through various phases of growth or derivatives of products or even changes in leadership, but you still have the same guiding principles. My very favorite example here is the brand of the Navy SEALs. If you follow the sequence that I just said, they have a set of beliefs: valor, honor, tenacity. They have a set of daily habits that they practice. And then they have the perception of being badasses, and therefore it's real. As opposed to, imagine a group of people sitting around saying, okay, we need to create this image that we're badasses. What do we need to look like and act? No, they actually are legitimate badasses, the ultimate special forces.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to point out, I've got some friends that are SEALs. Next time I see them, I'm going to be like, so you've given me this perception you're a badass, and I'm just waiting for the whoop ass that'll follow that. So.
You also see it in bull riders. But, a bull rider never talks about being a bull rider, rarely, a professional bull rider. I mean, that's what they do for a living. But they're very self-assured, they're quiet, and their brand grows organically because they're not going out and they're not trying to, let's put it this way, guys. Most people, especially men, have they wait for the marketplace to tell them what their identity is. And then your brand is at the mercy of shifting winds of opinion and societal trends and all that other stuff. Instead, go inward, go to the heart, go to the soul, and say, okay, what do I believe? What are my behaviors that are attached to that? And how will that then be manifested in how I'm perceived by others? Primarily around, in the case of a tech company, the culture, the product, and the customer experience.
It's interesting, Justin, listening to you define branding in this way. It makes me think that every time I've been involved with a rebranding or talk to someone about rebranding, it's really not rebranding in the context that you're talking about at all.
Right. And what's interesting, just kind of listening abstract, because Justin has helped me with some of this, and I'm actually kind of sitting here going, I need more help with this. But what's kind of neat is that when you're doing branding this way, especially when we're building our own companies and we're participating in something that's exciting and passionate, this almost lets us lead better lives. I mean, if you've taken time to go inward and you figured stuff out, you lead authentic brands, but there's a lot of benefit to that beyond just, hey, I got a cool brand. That's neat. Yeah. Hey, so this is neat. So we got a question in from our live stream. Justin, how do you define brand equity?
So
or what do we need to think about relative to it?
What's that?
Or what do we need to think about relative to brand equity?
Yeah. So brand equity is essentially the number of believers that you have and how they feel about you. This is why if you have 100-ish connected people that believe in you, you can run for and win the presidency of the United States. That's the power of brand equity. And brand equity is not purchased, it's earned. That's why one of the big mistakes that I see startup companies make over and over and over again is they spend way too much money and energy and time on trying to buy attention as opposed to earn brand equity. And so if I had to say brand equity as a single word, it's trust. And that comes from a belief system. So a company can make a mistake. JetBlue can make a mistake. That if another airline did it, it would be headlines for weeks. They can make a mistake, they apologize, and their brand keeps growing, and JetBlue is still JetBlue because the trust is there. So I think that's the most compact answer is it's trust, but it's earned trust, not paid for trust through advertising and campaigns.
Yeah, but you know what's neat about that too, using JetBlue, and there's a couple others that maybe come to mind, is you can do something that causes a slight erosion of that trust, but if it's a one-time thing and you handle it in accordance with the brand experience that you've set out for, your equities, it's almost what we call in the stocks a dead cat bounce. Like, yeah, it looks bad for a couple minutes and then, okay, you're good. But if you chronically do that, right, so it's almost like it's earned and the rent's due every day,
Right.
but you can build up some credibility in the bank too.
Yeah, absolutely. And perfection is the enemy of excellence.
I've learned that.
And so this idea that you need to go out and be perfect in the marketplace is such horse crap. You don't. You need to be real and honest. And we have this constant thing, Emily, my business partner, and I say constantly to our clients, show them the mess. Show them the mess. And what we mean by that is, let yourself be a human internally and externally. It's this obsession with perfection that it wrecks many brands because they take their eye off of what's most important, which is authenticity.
Justin, a lot of, and I've been in this situation personally, which is why I asked this question, but I think a lot of startups in the beginning have to make this decision. And my question is, what factors do you take into consideration when you have, let's say, two people that have their own, not personal brands, but somewhat company or product brands, and they want to come together to form a new company, a merger of some kind? What factors go into the decision? It can go one of two ways, right? Do you adopt person A's brand? Do you adopt person B's brand? Do you continue with the independent brands? Or do you wipe out person A and person B's brands and create a new brand underneath those two personalities?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's highly conditional. And so I would look at, well, what's the truth? Why did this happen? And the truth will reveal the best strategy. It always does. If you go to the truth of anything, it always reveals the best strategy. If the truth is one company was struggling and the other one got bought out, well, then maybe you should keep the company that bought the other company, keep their brand. If it's a true joint venture, because it's two people that decided that they were better off working together, which is essentially what happened with Emily and I to form Root and River, then you create a new entity out of it. So I would say the starting point is to go to the truth, and that will reveal the proper strategy.
But no, the concern in doing that is we talked about brand equity. I feel like when you take person A, person B's brand, and you to get rid of them and create a new brand, now you've got brand debt, right? That you have to recover.
I don't think that you do, actually, unless you suck. I mean, sucking is brand debt. Having less people know who you are isn't really it's not really brand equity, but it's not brand debt. And most people, if you communicate with them, and in this day and age of email automation and everything, there's no reason not to be able to tell your story in a very simple, conversational, fact-based way. And you just tell people, hey, here's what's going on. It's a little bit like how Medium handled their layoffs. They had some 50 layoffs earlier this week. The CEO came out and he wrote a post on Medium and he just talked about it and why they did it. It was a little, corporate lingo, but at least he explained the strategy in a way that was real.
No, that's helpful. That was like me asking questions, Justin.
I like that. It's fun.
That's good.
No, I knew this is how I was going to go. So here's some questions I have, though. So, Justin, you were part of a startup that you were a co-founder of it, and then it got sold eventually. Can you just tell us what some of that experience was like? Because there are a number of people who watch who are just interested in, did you have a day job? Was this a side hustle, as everybody likes to call it now? Just give us some of the context and give us some of the highlights and high notes of how that worked out.
Yeah, so it was a company I started. The founder was a man named Ken Holsinger, and we remain great friends to this day. And he and I had been in kind of cross paths in another venture. I was coming in to provide some strategic consulting, and he was on his way out as the COO. And he had this idea that we needed to figure out how to measure crowd engagement during a live presentation, like at a conference. And so we started, though, with brand. We started with belief systems and values. From the very beginning, at at a rented cabin up in Tamarack, Idaho. And we sat down and said, all right, what do we believe and what kind of talent do we need to bring on board in order to fulfill the ultimate goal, which is to build a product? The second thing is that we made brands the center of the strategy even during the fundraising phase, because we were able to create a presence in the marketplace that started to attract a lot of interest from partners, from investors, because we started with the brand and we didn't just start with the product idea. We're very, very intentional about our message and the story tone and all that. And then the third thing is, the third thing that I learned from that is just from a brand. I mean, I learned a million things. It was like the ultimate masters in business to be part of a startup for a couple of years. But from a brand perspective, the company that bought us were able to incorporate a lot of those. They were attracted to us because of our values, and then they were able to incorporate a lot of those values and values and beliefs and habits and mindset about innovation into the acquisition, because it was basically an acqui-hire. I wasn't part of the hiring thing, but Ken was and a few other people on the team. And so by having those values and beliefs established very early on, not only did it attract the buyer that ultimately bought our product, but it enabled them to move in and be part of the family. And it was like a family merger more than it was a business merger, because it was an acquisition of a little tiny company in Boise, Idaho, from a big giant company based in Dallas. So it wasn't, that process was made more smooth and more had higher viscosity because of the emphasis on brand from the very, very, very first day of the company.
You know, it's interesting. We've talked a couple times now about some of the pathway out of your startup isn't just IPO or VC exit. It's an acquisition from somebody that you might have at one point thought was your competitor. You were the upstart, they were the competitor. And what I love about that is talking about the branding from an internal perspective and really thinking about your values as you get started means that if that happens, you didn't jeopardize yourself. You didn't poison the well down the road at some point. And we're starting more, and we'll have some stories and some threads on this as the year goes on, but looking at how does that integration work? And I think you just gave us a shining example of how it works well.
And I would add this to it, Mike, is that the thing that happens, the thing that brand does for a startup founder or founding team is it gives them a place to say yes or no from, related to markets that they want to go into, new products, VC money, and really it's who to say no to. They don't fit our culture, they don't fit what we need. We had, in the funding process, we had many opportunities to be funded earlier on in our startup, but we said no to them because they had strings attached, like they wanted us to move. They wanted to move the company out of Boise. I live in Austin, Texas now, but at the time I lived in the Boise area. They wanted us to move the company. They weren't willing to fund it unless we moved to Salt Lake or the Bay Area or LA. And we told them no, because we were able to do that because we knew what our values were and we knew what was important to us. The same thing with marketplace. We fairly early on learned that we've got to say no to the tire kickers and the looky-loos and the ones that want to, we said firmly no to a freemium model. And we stuck to a paid model that is more around the way that GoToMeeting or Join.me or whatever, how they did it in the virtual space, as opposed to the app version, which is, try to get a bunch of users and then somebody wants to buy those eyeballs from you. We didn't go that strategy because we knew what to say no to.
Yeah. So one last question then, and this is the perfect follow-up to that and a way to put a nice bow on this. Mm-hmm. Somebody out there right now, they've got an idea. Probably for a security startup. It could be a startup and they're just thinking about security as they do it. So as somebody who understands branding, works with a lot of startups, has been through some startups your own, what's one thing that you think people should focus on to go make it happen this year?
Right. I would say, no matter what, never, ever, ever give up the role of chief spiritual officer. Never delegate your culture to anyone else and trade for money. Getting paid to do stuff you don't want to do with people you don't like is also the definition of prostitution. So don't do that. And but that goes back to that thing of never, ever give up the role of chief spiritual officer. And what I mean by that is to be the keeper of the mission, the flame, the original concept, that back of the napkin moment where you're like, well, what if we did this? And that fire in the soul, never give that to anyone else to manage. Because as soon as you do that, you create this odd sort of dissonance between yourself and your original mission, and you begin to take on the role of a startup CEO rather than the actual just being a human being that's got a mission and a passion, loves people, and wants to grow. So that's my one thing for everyone is don't give that up. Don't give up that role. I don't care if you get $1 billion in funding. Never give up the role of being the chief spiritual officer of your brand.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Thanks.
That's gonna be my new title for Paul, the chief spiritual officer.
Yeah, that's right.
Security Weekly in this show.
That's it.
You should guide us. Justin, I always love talking to you, and it was a treat to have you on the show and share some insights. I know that a lot of people listening to it, this is going to be a little bit of an eye-opener for them, and hopefully they'll put us through it. And if they've got questions, you can shoot the questions in to us at the show. You can hit us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. You can send the email in. And if it's for Justin, I can direct you to Justin, or we'll answer them. And he can get me some answers, and we'll bring them back on the show at some point in the future. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, and on our website, Mike, at rootandriver.com, we have we're prolific in blogging. And a lot of it is similar to this tone. It's different. It's schema busting. It's not a bunch of how to do email marketing. It's how to think different about your brand. So
yeah, what I'll say too is it's well. So if people looking at this and you're trying to do that, and again, there's more we could talk about, but Emily is a talented artist, and so there's always some really cool art that goes with it. You're both good writers, and I enjoy it. I learn a lot. So yeah, hopefully other people will as well.
Great, and thank you to both of you for the opportunity, and I love that you've invested in this. People in your space in particular need this type of real talk, to quote Mike, straight talk, and so thank you for the opportunity to come on and share some ideas.
Justin, thanks so much for appearing on Startup Security Weekly.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned.